What's up? Holiday here. And today I would like to talk about a book that I already read it with a few friends of mine. It's called The Problem with Work by Kathi Weeks. The full title is The Problem with Work, Feminism, Marxism, Anti-Work Politics, and Post-Work Imaginaries. And this book is really hard to read, but it's really good. And for anyone who is anti-capitalist, but you don't really know where to start, and you don't really know like how to articulate that, this is a really great book. And I'm sure there's easier books to start with, but I'm making this channel so that if you have a hard time reading this book or you're not gonna read this book, I'm gonna summarize some of the concepts that Kathi Weeks talks about in this book, starting with the introduction. So one of the things that she says in the introduction is that even the best job is a problem when it monopolizes so much of your life. And she talks about things that I had never really thought about before. One of the things she talks about that I hadn't thought about before was that on page 3, she says, the fact that at present, one must work to earn a living is taken as part of the natural order of things rather than as a social convention. And I had never really thought about this before. Why is our time so consumed by work? And she also talks about how we think of work in a personal way. We don't think of it as a political way. Like when we complain about our jobs or complain about work, we're thinking about our work situation, our organization, our boss. We're not thinking about the broader political system and structures that have created work as a necessity. See, like a lot of her ideas seem so maybe radical today, like radical in this context, but I think in the future, people are gonna look back on this and be like, wow, like she was so ahead of her time. Why weren't more people thinking about this back then? Some other things she talks about is how just like the way that the concept of work has just like embedded itself in everything. I mean, even in the field of social work, the purpose of it originally, and actually to this day, was to help people become work ready, like help people find jobs. And if you think about it, like homeless shelters, like most of them, if not all of them, require people to like go out and look for a job every single day. But in order to meet our basic needs, in order to have a place to live, in order to have food to eat, in order to get healthcare, we have to work at a job. And it makes sense to us because that's what we've been like ingrained with and entrenched with our entire lives. But if you really think about it, that just seems kind of crazy. Why shouldn't we be allowed to exist and be alive and have our basic needs met? Because we deserve it, because we're human beings. I think the alternative argument is if you're not willing to work, then you deserve to be on the street, you deserve to starve, you deserve to die from a health illness that you can't afford to get taken care of. That just seems so horrifying and such a lack of compassion to have that viewpoint. Other things she talks about is how the struggle against work. So on page 13, she says, the struggle against work is a matter of securing not only better work, but also the time and money necessary to have a life outside of work. If you really think about it, our days are like more like 11 or 12-hour work days if we include like the commute time, the time we have to take out of our day because we're taking a break. You're not really working an 8-hour day, like you're working a 9-hour day, plus your commute time, so it's more like an 11 or 12-hour day. Where does that leave us time to have a life outside of work? And why are we so defined by our work and our jobs? Like why? I mean, I know for me, I love my career and I really identify with my career and it's really become part of my identity. And this book made me really question that and think about it. Like, why did I choose this? Why did I want to have a job that is part of my identity? And it's part of this whole system of work and the way it works in our society, no pun intended. So she talks about other things like work and labor, working class, and she really grounds her ideas and her arguments in theoretical perspectives, which is what makes this book a little hard to read sometimes. She also talks about like Marxist theory, Marxist feminist theory. And one of the things she talks about that I found super interesting is on page 29. She says, "Today, however, it seems unlikely that socialism can serve as a persuasive signifier of a post-capitalist alternative." Basically what she means is we can't use the word socialism anymore. We can't say like, I'm a democratic socialist, I'm a Marxist socialist, I'm a feminist socialist, because using the word socialist is gonna just shut us down. There are a lot of people who have demonized socialism, even though we have socialism in our society. Like if you think about it, public libraries, public schools, things like that, like that's socialism in practice. But we can't use that language because people have demonized the word socialism so much that it's just not, we can't fight for that word. We have to fight using different words. We have to change our language. She goes on to say, "There is the problem of the name itself. It has been some time since the language of socialism could resonate in the United States as a legible and generative utopian vocabulary, even though it continues to serve occasionally as a viable dystopia for the right." So that's her basically explaining the reason why the name and the term of socialism is a problem today, unfortunately, which I also think it's fair. And when she goes further into her argument, it makes more sense to me. So on the very next page, she talks about socialist feminists, and she uses this term that I found so interesting, how socialist feminists seem to know too much too soon. And what she means by that is they have all these ideas and these visions for this like socialist utopian future and map out how it's gonna work. And what Kathi Weeks argues in this book is that we don't know what it's gonna look like. We have no idea what a post-work future will look like, and to map it out and create all these like rules and systems before it exists is to know too much too soon. And part of building this new post-work world is to imagine different alternatives and to try to put things in practice and work towards those goals without knowing what those might be. Even the ideas that she proposes in this book, we might go beyond them. We might go way beyond them. We might create this whole future that even Kathi Weeks has not yet imagined. And that's part of her whole point. So that's basically the bulk of the introduction, where she talks about these things. The rest of the things she talks about is things that she like expounds upon later in the book. So part of her demands and part of her hopes for the future are things like a 6-hour workday with the same amount of pay. She talks about how she's going to justify her case for shorter hours. And she also talks about the reason why. So demanding shorter hours is conceived as a demand for more time to imagine, more time to experiment with and participate in the relationships of intimacy and sociality that we choose. And she says again that the part of her project's aspiration is to remake a life outside of work. And she talks about how she wants to make the case for the importance of a political theory of work, and specifically a political theory that seeks to pose work as a political problem of freedom, which she goes into in more depth later on in the book. And she ends with, the problem with work is not just that it monopolizes so much time and energy, but that it dominates the social and political imaginaries. How might we conceive the content and parameters of our obligations to one another outside the currency of work? This book is amazing. So that was just the introduction. I hope I've given you a lot to think about. If you have questions or would like things explained further, please comment. Hopefully you pick up this book and start reading it. I'm gonna try to post a video at least once a week about each chapter. For some chapters, I might even break them down into like 2 parts it's really, really theoretical, and she talks about a lot of complicated ideas. So I'm going to try to make this series as simple to understand as possible. So I hope you enjoy it, and happy reading and learning.